My dad remembers these lovely little biscuits from his childhood, and he's now in his 80s. They're called monkey faces. This 1950s recipe was published in Epicurean magazine in 1983 and came from the Granby Cake Shop in South Yarra, Melbourne. They're shortbread style biscuits made with ground almonds and sandwiched with apricot jam and dusted with icing sugar. And they also work beautifully gluten-free. I love finding and preserving wonderful old recipes like this and hopefully keeping them alive for future generations. So the biscuit mixture has only got 4 ingredients, and one of them is very soft butter, which I might have sapped a little bit too long in the microwave, and that's 250 grams of butter, 250 grams of just plain flour, 125 grams of caster sugar, and 125 grams of ground almonds, almond meal. And even the recipe says use your hands just to bring that all together. And I find it easier just tipping the whole lot on the bench. And just knead it till it all comes together. Now, because of the high butter content, if you put that in the fridge, it'll firm up too much to roll. So what the recipe says to do is just to cover it with a damp cloth, and I've just put that under the tap and wrung it out, and let it rest, and probably for about half an hour. Now, if it's really, really hot where you are, you can pop it in the fridge for 15 minutes or so. And for the gluten-free version, because it's just me, I've just halved this recipe. So it's 125 grams of soft butter, 125 grams of gluten-free plain flour, and to that, I'm just going to add 1/8 a teaspoon of xanthan gum. If you were making the full batch, that would be 1/4 teaspoon. Then 63 grams of caster sugar and 63 grams of almond meal. And the same thing, I work the butter into the mixture and make a dough out of it. If your gluten-free mixture feels a little bit too dry, you can add like a teaspoon of cold water. But try and bring it all together first. Sometimes gluten-free flour can be more absorbent, but that doesn't need anything today. The high butter content works well in this gluten-free one. I'll put a damp, clean towel on this one too so it doesn't dry out, and just let it relax for half an hour. So the dough's been resting for half an hour now, and I lightly sprinkle my bench and a rolling pin and roll this out 4 millimeters, the recipe says they should be. And it's a very soft dough because of all that butter and the almonds. And you don't have to put them as a monkey face, as a double biscuit. You can just use them singularly, and they're lovely little biscuit. You can ice them or decorate them or just have them plain. Just make sure it's all even as I can make it. Oh yeah, close enough, 3 or 4. It doesn't really matter. If you make them thinner, they'll take less time to cook. And I'm using a 7cm scone cutter here, but you can use any cookie cutter you have. And I just cut them out. And because it's such a soft dough, I get a thin egg slider and flour it and get the biscuits off that way and pop them onto the tray. Then I re-roll any remaining dough. You know, I made the original recipe one day, like the original quantities, and it was written for a shop. So it was 1 kilo of butter, 1 kilo of flour, and it made so much mixture that I got sick of cutting them out. And so in the end, I just rolled them into a neat sort of log shape, like so, well, neater than this. And then I put them in the fridge till they just hardened a little bit, and then I cut them. They worked wonderful. But this is a bit of fun. I'm going to need 2 trays. To be honest, I think these are thicker than those ones. Doesn't matter. Now, they don't spread much at all, but just allow a little bit of room around them. And I want to make sure I have an even number. So I have 12 on that tray and 11 on that tray. So I've got an odd number, but that's a taste test. Now, to make the holes, I find a straw works really well, or this is from the piping bags, and that little attachment works well too. So you need to put 3 holes in one side of the cookie, the other ones are left normal. It's good to dip it in flour first and put one eye. Now get the dough out, because if you leave the dough in, it'll just cake over. And the second eye and a mouth. Now these go in a warm oven, it says, and I take that as 170 degrees conventional or 150 degrees fan forced. And I've got the fan forced oven in because I'm going to put the 2 trays in at once and then I'll swap them over, but these should take about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. The faces and the plain ones. And I'll turn them over halfway, so I might check them in 10 minutes. So they've had 10 minutes and I'm just turning the trays around to give them probably another 10 minutes. You don't want them golden brown. And whilst that's happening, the very last thing, you pipe a little bit of reduced jam into the holes. So I'm just putting, you know, like half a cup of jam in there. So I simply bring it to the boil and I just let it simmer for a few minutes. You don't want to reduce it too much, otherwise it will go like toffee. And that's enough. That's been simmering away for 5 minutes. I'll turn it off and wait for it to cool down. So that's the base, and that's had 19 minutes. And when you see it getting brown around the edges like that, they're ready. So I'll transfer these to a wire rack to cool completely. They smell really lovely. And the tops I just gave a few more minutes. I think it was about 22 minutes, just because I think I accidentally made them a little bit thicker. They're a lovely light golden colour, not too much colour at all. Because they're a shortbread, you don't want too much colour, so they stay light and tender. Now everything has been de-gluten and I'll do the gluten-free ones. The gluten-free dough is a little bit more delicate, and that's only to be expected. Maybe I'll make these gluten-free ones a little bit smaller, and that helps me to remember which ones are which as well. And this is just a 5 centimetre scone cutter I'm using for these gluten-free ones. And this time I'm just using the cream or the pastry bag attachment. And these are going to go in the oven, and I think for about 20 minutes. And that's the gluten-free batch. They probably were a little bit too long in the oven, but I'll just leave them now. And they are more fragile, so I'll leave them to cool completely. So this is the jam that I reduced, and it's got lovely and thick and shiny and glossy, but they'll get piped into the little holes last. And now the fun part, sandwiching them together. So all I do is get a bottom half and spread some apricot jam on the bottom. Now if you don't like apricot jam, you can use any type of jam. Just traditionally they were with apricot. And these are quite substantial, these big ones. Then I simply put the monkey face part on top of each one. They're very cute. I sift over a little icing sugar. I've misplaced my piping bag, so I'm just going to use an ordinary plastic bag, and I'll just snip a tiny little bit off at the end and put this reduced thick jam in that, and then simply in each hole just put a tiny little bit of this reduced jam. And these freeze well as well, or they'll last a few days in an airtight container. And I'll do the same with the gluten-free ones. And these are smaller than the other ones, and I still made the same quantity with only half the batch. Bit of icing sugar. And they're the gluten-free ones. I'll just cut one open for you inside. There you go. Beautiful almond shortbread. It's a lovely recipe to keep alive. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.